Good morning. This is Jason Orm, Chair of the Oregon Board of Accountancy Laws and Rules Committee. Today is Tuesday, November 4th, and the time is 8:47 a.m. I'm calling this public meeting of the Laws and Rules Committee to order. This is a hybrid in-person and Zoom meeting that is being recorded and being held at the offices of the Oregon Society of CPAs at 10206 Southwest Laurel Street in Beaverton, Oregon. We have a quorum to start the meeting, and I don't know if we're expecting anyone additional to join us at this point or not. Please be sure to mute your mic when you'd like to speak. Please either raise your hand in the room or on Zoom, raise it so I can see it on the screen. Virtually use the virtual raise your hand option. Committee members, liaisons, and support staff can speak at any time. For members of the public observing, which we have none, is that correct, Andrew? For members of public observing, please use the public comment opportunity for any comment you may have unless specifically called upon. In addition, members of the public are limited to 3 minutes of comment, and the chair reserves the right to terminate comment if the comment does not pertain to the issues the committee is considering. Please do not use the chat room for any discussions. Should any technical issues arise, we'll pause the meeting until they're resolved. I'll now take a roll call. Present at the OSCPA offices are, to my left,
Sherry McPherson.
Jason Orm,
Martin Petioni.
and I saw Beth move her hand that we need to turn our mics on when we speak. Otherwise, people can't hear us.
Yeah, I didn't hear Angie at all. So I was just, okay.
Went on.
Oh, okay, good.
Now it's on. Angie Hunt, Board Legal Counsel.
I'm going to start at what is the top of my screen, Mr. Robinson,
Robinson via Zoom.
Melissa,
Melissa Wall via Zoom.
Beth,
That's Spencer via Zoom.
Amanda,
Amanda Phillips by Zoom.
Ray,
Ray Johnson by way of Zoom.
and our technical support wizardry in the offices of the Board of Accountancy, Quinn.
Quinn Stoddard, board staff here by Zoom.
All right. Anyone that I have not recognized? All right. So we sent out, so for votes in this meeting, remember to state full name before yay, nay, or abstain. That will keep Angie from glaring at me and saying, Jason, you need to have full name. Let's see. So everyone has received the board or the draft agenda. Are there any comments or corrections or additions to that agenda? Hearing no comment, I would accept a motion to approve the agenda as proposed.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Sherry McPherson, so moved. Before everybody else, I'll take a second.
That's Spencer second.
Beth Spencer second. Any comment? Hearing none. All in favor, starting with Amanda?
Aye.
Amanda, I can't hear you.
Amanda, aye.
Okay. Melissa,
Melissa Wall, aye.
Beth,
That's Spencer, I.
Ray,
Ray Johnson, aye.
Sherry, Jason Orm, aye. Motion passes. All right. Last time, you all remember, we went through the work that Angie had done on 150 pages, 140 pages of rule. With the materials today, Martin also sent out what Washington is doing in rule, and I think we had that as a reference point before. It was good for me to reread it last night because it was a reminder of what we'd done. We're following pretty much in line with what they've done, or we've come up with the same things. What I thought we would do today is I would turn to Angie and say, can you walk us through the specific points? So Board of Accountancy, let me give the report of what happened there. We proposed this to the Board of Accountancy. I just don't know why they didn't want me to walk them through page by page of the 150 pages. They decided to not do that. They did make there was one vote. There was discussion around the bachelor's versus 120 hours. And there was a comment that, well, gee, shouldn't it really be 120 hours? And the discussion went to, but we crafted the legislation to say bachelor's degree. And so there was a vote for yays and one nay that we leave it at bachelor's degree. So that was the activity that took place at the board level.
And if I may, Jason, I
Please.
think that discussion, as I recall, was also focused on, because we have this language really in a place that affects both the requirements to sit for the exam as well as affects the requirements for initial licensure. And in essence, the discussion was, as you indicated, about should we retain the specificity of the 120 semester hours, or are we okay with removing that? And the board direction to the LRC basically was take out the specific reference to the 120. What that means is that if you've had a chance to look at the Washington materials, right? The Washington materials essentially indicate, which is now final. I think the last time we saw it, it was still a proposal, but those rules that you have in your packet now are actually final as adopted by the Washington board. And in essence, what that means on that specific issue is that the Washington board has landed exactly where the board also wants us to land, which is basically saying, in order to either be licensed or to sit for the exam, 3 times underlined, right? You essentially need to have either a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or some kind of a post-bac with an accounting concentration, which is the Washington speak for you need to have both buckets, what we like to refer to as the buckets, which just like us are 24 semester hours in each, 36 quarter hours if you prefer the quarter hours. But there's also no specificity around the 120 semester hours. So effectively, as I read the materials here, what the board essentially asked for in terms of aligning with, I think, the statutory intent, which is to be less specific about the 120 semester hours, is exactly where the Washington board landed as well. What I don't remember off the top of my head, what you have in your materials, and that's actually something, if you don't mind, Jason, just want to state really clearly, right? You now have this Word document that's starting to look familiar, right? That represents a boat ton of work from our council primarily, a little bit of stuff from me. It also has, I tried very hard, and Andrew, as you have time during the meeting today, I tried very hard to pull in all the CPE edits that were in a separate document in the last meeting. You don't have that separate document anymore. So you also have all the CPE pieces that you saw last time integrated into this document that's now entitled Meeting Materials for number 4, 2025. Andrew, if you have time during the meeting today, if you can just do a little bit of quality control, making absolutely sure I caught everything. I tried really hard to make sure that those would transfer over correctly, but if you see any problems, please let me know. Full disclosure, I haven't had a chance to talk with either Jason or Angie or Andrew about this. We also got some really nice feedback that you saw, I think, in a separate document from our investigator, Jeremiah, who's also been a wonderful resource at the back end of the office. I have not been able yet to ensure that his feedback, which is really mostly detail focused on adoption dates of professional standards, is fully in here or not. It looked like it was in here to some extent, but it's not really. So I will work offline between now and the next meeting that we have in November to do that. My assumption is, and please correct me if that's wrong, that's not really a policy decision. That's just
Yeah.
about making sure that we have the right dates of professional standards in here that we need to kind of align with and adopt. So with your permission, Jason, I would simply like to work offline between now and the 18th to also make sure that all of Jeremiah's stuff, helping us with his stuff, gets pulled in to the next version of the document that we're going to see on November 18 LRC, which we'll talk about later what all needs to happen on the 18th. But that's wanted to just kind of briefly lay out, because you called out the board action, right? I want to just give assurances. I think that is in here. I think we already took out the specificity, if I remember correctly, of the 120
Yes.
from here. So that all aligns, right? There is that missing Jeremiah piece. And I hope that that helps as context before we do deep dive with council.
So it's sort of a separate topic. Separate topic. I understand that part of in the rules, we're specifying that candidates must.
Jerry, can you speak up?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, thank you.
I'm so sorry. I understand that we have a spot where the experience must, like the 2 years experience must be completed before setting for the exam. This is from,
That's just for the PAs, for the,
oh, that's just for the PA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really different.
Yes,
in terms of
yes.
Pathway,
It-
because it's an experience-based pathway to be able to sit for the
Okay.
exam.
Yes, thank you. I mean, literally, this is like just hit my email box a second ago.
oh, okay.
So, okay, thank you. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for that immediate check mark.
So I think, and one thing is, sorry guys, when I sent it to Martin, it was redlined in red. And so there was a few spelling errors that didn't get caught. I'm seeing them now. So I'm kind of fixing them as I go through, because now they're blue. So they're showing up better. Like when they're redlined, it's hard to see sometimes when there's a spelling error. But anyhow, so yeah, so the 120 hours has been removed for the exam portion. And so that starts on page 30. And so what the other thing I did too was like I sort of took out so anything that we had sort of already talked about. I took out all the sort of notes, and I think one thing I mentioned to Martin is that when you guys go to publish this or whatever for like the first pass through, when you send it out to the public, you might want to put back in maybe a comment for each one that shows like why it's changed, like the statute change, right? So people can know that this is coming from a statute. Because I think a lot of times what you'll get is people be like, I want it this way, but the statute is, what guides it. So if the statute is, I think it would just be helpful for people to see that that's why the change happened or whatever. So yeah, so the 120 hours was what the board wanted, was very clear that they wanted that not to be a requirement anymore. With the exception of Logan, he voted against it. And then, so that was the sort of major change there. The other major thing that the board talked about that was a little different than what you guys, well, I think we just kind of put a pin in it actually, was that the board does want to be able to discipline for peer review violations. So that was the other rule. I sort of like just wrote a very quick rule and put it in, and
So that's in Division 50 at the
Division
end.
50. Should I wait on that one and do the other ones first?
No, you started.
I know,
let's
sorry.
Slide, no,
Yeah.
slide down where,
I'm looking.
I
oh,
think
there's Division
it's
50.
in,
Okay. So I'm at least in 50 now. Division 50, about page 98 of the doc.
Or did you put it in?
Oh, no, I
Division
put
30?
it in discipline. I put it in the discipline part.
I think you need that looks to me like it should be a Division 30 edit, not a Division 50.
Yeah.
Okay, so back upstream to Division 30.
because it's not the peer review committee that's disciplining, it's the board.
Right. Okay, it's on page 50 or 83. So basically just adding to this rule that says upon notification to the board that a licensee or registrant has failed peer review more than one time, the board may discipline the licensee or registrant for failing peer review in accordance with, and then whatever that statutory site will be. The notification of the failure of peer review will be prima facie evidence of the failure. And that's just like a way that you can say that
Ah,
it's, we don't have to prove the underlying stuff. It's just that, sort of on the second time, they can discipline. Does anybody?
So which? I'm at page 83. I think.
Number 15, it should be.
15, got
blue.
it. Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you, thank you. I really thought it was on page 83.
Mine is not showing page numbers. Which OAR?
oh, sorry.
it's in division 30
Okay.
and the citation would be, if that helps you find it, but it's gonna take several pages. It's in 801,
Okay,
030,
okay,
0020,
okay.
sub
15.
15.
Got it. Thank you.
And 15 is essentially an entirely new ad that's just thrown in at
Yeah.
the very, very end.
And I think that fits with what the board had requested. So, Mr. Robinson, does that seem familiar?
A little bit.
Okay,
So can I ask a question
please,
as a concerned citizen?
please.
We have the qualifications for licensure talks about having evidence of your bachelorette degree, right? And or a master's or blah blah blah. But we have the same thing in qualifying to sit for the CPA exam, correct?
Correct?
So if you have to qualify to sit for the CPA exam and you've passed the CPA exam, there's not different CPA exams, are there?
No.
Mm,
And do we ask for all of this information if we grant reciprocity?
Yes.
Uh,
Well,
no.
you ask it that sorry, you ask. Well, I'm assuming that the state would do it, that the other state would do it, right? And then they just provide proof of
The
the.
original issuing state
Yeah.
would have to have this data to issue the initial license, but the whole point of reciprocity is
Right.
that we don't look underneath essentially the hood, is that once somebody is licensed as a CPA in another jurisdiction, that we don't subject a reciprocity application to the same level of scrutiny as we do an initial application. Does that answer the question?
That does answer that question. So why would we do the same thing for qualifications for licensure?
So just to.
If they've
right, so
if
just-
they've passed the CPA exam, didn't they already qualify under those things to sit for the CPA exam?
Right, it's just like another sort of like when because you're going to have people that apply to sit for the CPA exam in other states,
Mhm.
right? So they apply somewhere else and maybe that state doesn't have it or whatever, they could be different. And so especially because we have multiple pathways now that maybe other states might not have.
Mhm.
So we need to,
But again, it's the same CPA exam,
right, but different
and they've
qualifications.
passed. But they've passed the CPA exam, and
Right.
that is the qualification for them to get licensure.
Well, that
Why do we
and-
go back and to look at their education when we don't do that with reciprocity?
Let me try this. So let me try this a little differently. So
If you guys have already discussed this, don't make me rehash
Oh,
the whole thing.
I think
So-
this is really important for everybody. No, I'm actually glad you asked the question because that's what's supposed to happen here, right? Is that we make sure that we level set and that everybody's kind of has a really good grasp of what we're doing here. So the issue really is that when it comes to specifically sitting for the exam, states are actually pretty all over the place in terms of when they allow someone to sit for the exam. And it happens quite, I don't want to say all the time, but certainly not infrequently, that we have applicants for initial licensure in Oregon that were not originally Oregon candidates. So they did not have to meet Oregon standards to sit for the exam, meaning they may not have a master's degree. They may not have the accounting buckets when they sat for the exam, which means that essentially it forces us to write our expectation of what it means to qualify for initial licensure. Because you're right, if you're an Oregon person coming up the Oregon pathway, it should be a yawn and why are you duplicating this? But for folks coming in from out of state, we may have applicants come for initial licensure coming in where unless we require it here, saying, hey, you must have these accounting buckets, you must have a bachelor's degree, that they won't have it simply based on the fact that they sat for the CPA exam through another state.
So wouldn't that be the same for reciprocity?
No.
Because the
no.
way they got their CPA license wouldn't be the same all across the state. In a single state, they could qualify in different criteria.
There are slightly different pathways, but in general, it is there. We don't know of any jurisdiction that wouldn't at least require either a bachelor's degree or a master's degree at the licensure level. That is not true at the exam level. Does that make sense?
Okay. It does.
And Jason, reciprocity does get a little bit of a pass. It's that not looking under the hood, because we're saying we trust other states, and that when people are active and current in good standing CPAs from there, we're going to accept that. That was part of the whole stepping away from substantial equivalency and moving to mobility by the states, which we worked through quite a bit.
Well, and isn't the test the ultimate criteria for?
Well, the test and the experience,
For
right?
ease, exam experience
Yes.
and education.
Yeah. So if we're saying exam experience and education are all criteria that makes a good CPA, but yet we're letting reciprocity stand, but we're saying to qualify to become a CPA, you need to prove all the stuff again, essentially. Because I know there's different ways to get into the sitting for the exam, but it just seems to me we're putting another difficulty in front of something, and we're trying to make it easier for people to become CPAs in Oregon.
So you don't have
So-
to have experience to take the exam. So you do
Yeah.
have to have experience for the license. And like Martin said, people can take the exam as a candidate of another state, which sometimes allows them to take it 6 months earlier than their bachelor's degree is issued. And so it does make sense to restate those for the licensing when you're dealing with those other candidates. Because they're not asking for an initial license in another state, they're asking for an Oregon initial license. And so they're not
Yeah,
offered the
yes.
reciprocity.
So Jason, actually, I think one of the things that's actually really helpful is that you've spent a lot of time at DAS and now at the Department of Corrections. And from a strictly bureaucratic standpoint, one of the things that I would say to you is if I have an Oregon person coming through the initial licensure process, right? Essentially what this means is I don't have to look under the hood because they are an Oregon candidate that already essentially qualified to sit for the exam under Oregon rules, which basically means short of the experience requirement, which does not exist to take the exam, that means that I only have to look at the experience requirement. In that case, has that person met the experience requirement before initial licensure, right? So even though it looks duplicative, it's really just a guardrail, right? What it also means is that and I'm just going to pick a state, and I know it's a public meeting, so hopefully I won't get in trouble. But let's say if I have somebody coming in from South Dakota, right? I'm not immediately familiar with what South Dakota does with respect to quality. sit for the exam, right? So if I have a South Dakota person who's transitioning into Oregon after having sat for the exam as a South Dakota person, we will take a much deeper look at that application to make sure that we have the accounting buckets, the degree, and the experience requirements. It becomes a much deeper review at the initial licensure stage. The reason why we don't have to worry about that, if I now pick on South Dakota again, is that every single state out there, all 55 NASBA jurisdictions, have a experience, exam, education requirements at the level of initial licensure. So at the reciprocity level, I know that they have the 3Es. I don't have that knowledge when it comes to the CPA exam. I don't know which states necessarily are not requiring portions of what we require for initial licensure. In Oregon, it's easy, but with other states, it's not. Does that help? It's more of a guardrail thing rather than a we make it harder thing.
Well, but our guardrails, do they make a better CPA? Because if so, then we're allowing people with reciprocity to come in that aren't good CPAs. So Andrew gave me the piece for Alaska. Alaska does not require any upper division accounting courses for licensure. Okay, cool. But we'll take an Alaskan licensed CPA and allow them reciprocity. So in other words, you're saying that we're allowing bad CPAs to come in once they've gotten their license, but we won't license a bad CPA.
So
I'm just asking the question because it seems like it's another guardrail barrier.
I don't know that it's a barrier. I think it's just trying to say, if you want to get initially licensed in Oregon, this is what you do to get initially licensed in Oregon. It may be slightly different in other states. If you've already have the license and have been practicing in other states, you can come here. But if you want to get initially licensed here, this is the pathway to do it here. And I think that's essentially what we're saying.
And it didn't used to be this way. It used to be, per my experience, that you had to go through sort of the initial licensure criteria in every state you got licensed in. I lived in Florida. I initially took the CPA exam in Idaho and sat as an Idaho candidate. Then we moved to Virginia. Then I took it in Virginia as a Virginia candidate. Then I was initially licensed in Idaho. Then I was licensed in Virginia and had to go through the whole process again in Virginia. Then we moved to Texas, and I opted not to get licensed in Texas because the person that I had my experience under had died, and the state of Texas required that I have him certified dead by the state of Virginia. And I didn't want to go through that process. But that's what I'm saying. You had to go through that. So you had to reprove yourself every time you switch states.
In the process of reciprocity.
No, prior to the process of reciprocity.
Okay.
Prior to people saying we're not looking under the hood.
And I think there was a time in Oregon where if you hadn't been licensed in another state for more than 5 years, we looked under the hood to see that you met our requirements, as opposed to meeting the state where you sat for the exam, which just put another barrier out there. And I think those are barriers that have been removed. So I'm quite comfortable with what the pathways we've laid out.
Okay.
Well, I was going to say, as a layperson too, I mean, when I look at this, I can appreciate that there are checks and balances, in states. I mean, that's why states go through, complaints processes. It's why other states, have obligations for certain points along the way too, depending upon what's being completed by the CPA, where they're licensed, what they're doing. So that's my feedback.
so there's one, actually, Jason, actually what you just made me realize is that I don't actually think, I never looked at the reciprocity rules at the time when like wasn't really thinking about that. And I'm looking at the statute change on this. Did we not put anything in there? Because so the way that reciprocity, so before we didn't really have specific statutory language around reciprocity. It was kind of, it was in a weird place. And so we did fix that. And in 797, it's section 9. And it says, the Oregon Board of Accountancy can issue a certified public accountant license to a person who's licensed and good standing as a certified public accountant in another state who, submits an application, passes the exam, pays the required fee, and provides evidence satisfactory to the board of one or more of the following. And the following is A, that basically that they met the substantial equivalency. The place where they went, that they got their license meets our substantial equivalency stuff. Or, and that was this is how we were getting it to the allow sort of like kind of like around that other sort of issue, was that the person has been practicing as a certified public accountant for a period of 4 years or more within the last 10 years immediately preceding the person's application for a public accountant license. So I might, so we might need to like look through that. I mean, I feel like what we were doing before, we didn't necessarily make them provide proof of those classes, but we probably should be having them provide proof that they have a bachelor's degree. But they would
As
have
part
it,
of their-
right, because they would already have it. I don't know. So it is a good, I do think we probably do need to pass it those rules, just to make sure.
On the reciprocity side,
Yeah.
just for purposes of making sure that they align with Senate Bill 7.
Right, because I don't think I even thought about it, really.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it sounds like what I'm.
Amanda has her hand up.
I do. I feel like what we were trying to do before was separate mobility from reciprocity, not necessarily blanket reciprocity, right? The idea was a CPA anywhere is a CPA here for mobility purposes. So for signing tax returns, those types of things. But for anybody who was going to be practicing enough in Oregon to need a reciprocal Oregon license, those standards still applied. And so that's where I think the distinction was, and why we were okay with mobility being a CPA anywhere is a CPA everywhere, because the actual Oregon practice piece for the reciprocal license you still have to meet Oregon standards to be there. Was my understanding.
I thought that we had worked together to try to make reciprocity easier, because Oregon was one of the more challenging states, and one of our charges was to make it more like others. So I think we wanted to either include like the 4 in 10 rule, which I'm hoping we have. If we haven't, we should do that. But yeah, I mean, probably should evaluate education. But I know there was a request and intent to simplify that for reciprocity.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of that over the last few years, but I think it's very fair. And I think what I'm hearing here is a takeaway, Mr. Chair, is that we should spend a little bit of time offline between now and the November 18th meeting, just to make sure that we make the necessary language edits to fully align our existing reciprocity rules with what is already coming online come January 1 under Senate Bill 797. Sounds like we need to do a little bit of, if you will, QA on that piece, which in all honesty, I want to be really transparent here, given the discussion we just had, is to me not as much about, it's really not for me about what our policy should be. I think the policy discussion was largely settled by passage of Senate Bill 797. The issue is we want to make sure that our rules that we're recommending to implement the bill are in full alignment with what's in the bill. And it sounds like we need to do a little bit of QA offline between now and the 18th. Is that, does that sound fair to everyone, kind of as a takeaway from this?
I
Jason?
think so. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, so did anybody want to talk about the peer review rule?
But before we step to that,
Oh.
I have an administrative question. Now, Amanda probably asked for this, but she has a black box that covers most of her on the screen that we have that talks about playing a game in meetings.
Yeah.
Now, I know she probably asked
Yeah,
for
we
that
can't
to
see
be
her.
there so that she could hide behind it. But if we could
Oh.
remove that, that'd be great.
Yeah. And just
Perfect.
took care.
There she is. You guys probably couldn't see it, but
No,
here in the conference
on
room.
on our end, you were literally 3/4 the black box, and we were trying to fix it.
Yeah.
And again, you may have asked for that and I've spoiled it now. My abject apologies.
Thank you for the lesson, Andrew. I thought that was not through.
Okay.
so much. Well, I mean. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Angie.
Okay, any discussion on the peer review side? Of that, just limited the ability to discipline? Is it? Okay, then going back up. And I will tell you up to where in a second.
The coffee maker, I've not heard it do that.
Okay. So, going to OAR 801-010-10120, which is on page 50. So inactive. What happened at the board meeting on this was that the board wanted to get rid of the one employer. They could only do, sorry, you guys can't read my mind. Basically it was looking at, where it says an Oregon active CPA or PA that is not lapsed, expired, suspended, or revoked can apply for an active status. An active licensee cannot practice public accountancy, hold an ownership interest in a registered CPA or PA form, or be a sole practitioner. And then it says an inactive licensee not working in a CPA or PA firm can practice public accountancy for their employer. And so it used to say for one employer as follows. And then I had changed it to and that's why it's just deleting the and, but it was like, maybe it just for their employer as follows. And then says in private industry or government as staff, accountancy, CFO, or similar position, the inactive licensee can only practice public accountancy for their employer, and the employer of the inactive licensee cannot provide public accountancy services. So I didn't quite understand the conversation, and maybe either Jason understood more about what the board was concerned about, but they did not want it to be one employer. So I changed.
Not wanted to
They
be
did
one?
not want it to be one employer.
That is correct. Because of if I do bookkeeping services, not accounting, for more than one person, I would have more than one employer.
And so by using their language, it would allow me to have two employers because they are both my employer.
But I
Yeah.
thought we wanted to limit that because if they're doing bookkeeping, doesn't that fall into the definition of accounting? So they shouldn't have an inactive license? Like we were trying to address individuals who have a bookkeeping business as opposed to someone who was a CFO for a company.
Right. The idea, I think, is that if you are a W-2 employee for private businesses doing their books, you can do that for multiple people. You
Okay.
still can't be in business for yourself
Got
doing
it.
bookkeeping services, but you could have multiple part-time jobs doing part-time accounting for multiple W-2.
I remember that. Thank you.
And by using the term employer, Beth, I kind of went to where your head is, but if my wife has a Schedule C, she is not employed by any of the people she serves. She's employed in her other job with the Beaverton School District. Any other questions on that?
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it still like kind of goes over my head because I don't quite know what you guys actually do in practice. So, like, but as long as it says what you guys wanted to say, that's what I care about. So,
Okay.
To me, I look at it like if you're a W-2 employee, you're not holding yourself out to the public. If you're running your own business and you're running a bookkeeping business and people are paying you directly, then you are holding yourself out to the public as a bookkeeper, as an accountant slash potentially CPA.
Okay, if we're good with this discussion, I do have another question on this exact section. That we're here if folks are okay with moving on to that piece. And Andrew, fair warning, I'm gonna need your help on this one. So you're more grounded than I am in terms of database stuff. Well, yeah, so here's the deal, right? I'm looking at exactly where Angie just asked us to look, the language in 801, 010, 0120 on inactive status right now. And I'm looking at subsection 1, and it says an Oregon active CPA or PA that is not lapsed, 3 times underlined lapsed, expired, suspended, or revoked can apply for inactive status.
because that's like a lot of times you like to go from lapse to,
So we have a whole section of rules that covers how you can reinstate from lapse to inactive status. And here, that seems to say you can't.
yeah, I think
And I'm not sure how, I'm a little confused by that.
We also don't have an application process to downgrade from active to inactive.
Hold that thought, okay, because that's a really good observation. I want to first deal with this piece and make sure that we are all on the same page in terms of.
maybe it should just be expired, suspended, or revoked.
I think
'Cause
we
it's-
have to take the lapsed out of there.
Yeah.
Because we have
Right, that's the whole
reinstatements from
point.
lapsed status to inactive status all the time,
Okay.
right? Because people
Mm-hmm.
fall off the wagon. They don't renew. They said, oops, sorry, let me come in and reinstate. And that's pretty routine on the licensing side. And I'm, always looking a little bit to my right to Andrew, making sure that I don't overstate that. So I think we have to take the lapsed piece out of there.
And the active,
And what it doesn't say active.
It doesn't say active. It says,
an Oregon active CPA or PA.
oh, because they can't be by definition
Yeah, okay.
active.
Okay, sorry.
if
I
they
was
are-
looking at the last part of it. And
So it must
Oregon,
be an Oregon CPA or PA that is not expired, suspended, or revoked.
Yeah. So we have to strike the word active and the word
yep, got it.
lapsed.
So let me ask a question about that. Can I, as an active CPA, request to be inactive?
Yes,
Yes, we
Okay.
actually do that. You can downgrade, right? We just don't seem to have as much specificity, I think, as this is what I think what Andrew's question was about. Is that we have, for example, an option in the renewal process. I think it's still part of our renewal app, or somebody can say, hey, I'm renewing as inactive, right? Which means that they only have to meet the requirements for an inactive licensure renewal. So they don't have to show us 80 hours of CPE, but what is it, 32, 34?
32.
The 32 hours, right, for purposes of renewal. But I think what you're talking about, and then I'll shut up and give. We're talking outside the renewal side. There doesn't seem to be a good process, and I'm trying to figure out if it's a process question or a business question. Or somewhat, I want to off of active status.
It's a process question and rule question because licensing staff don't understand why a CPA may want to go from active to inactive mid-season or mid-renewal period.
My best answer to that is that we've never done a mid-season adjustment. We just say, just wait until your renewal time and just renew as inactive. So
That's been our response. We maybe 5, 6 of those a year we get people wanting to do that. I think we've downgraded.
Martin, it's difficult to hear you.
Um,
Thank you.
so. I think it's a process question where mid-year.
It's hard to hear you again, Martin. Are you speaking into the mic?
He's like, yeah.
He's eating the mic.
His batteries might be dying.
They're going offline for an offline conversation.
Is that yeah?
Can you
Hold
hear
on.
me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think it's his microphone.
Yeah, it's the microphone. Sorry. I thought it was
That's
probably
better.
someone who doesn't want to hear from me mucking with my mic and making sure that
You-
you guys can't hear me. So what I was trying to
The
point
equipment
out,
itself.
um, what I was trying to say to Andrew and the team here is that when it comes to essentially downgrading, I'm not sure if that's the best term, from active to inactive, we have normally never done that midstream, right? We basically say, look, you already have an active license. You met the qualifications for an active license, right? It gives you the greatest scope. If you now want to transition to inactive status, simply wait until you renew, and then come renewal time, you simply renew as an inactive, and you know ahead of time that you won't need to meet the CPE criteria. So we don't really have a good process for midstream, and I'm not sure that we need one. Unless folks disagree. I don't know that there's other states that downgrade folks mid-cycle.
Yeah, so what we've been doing is telling people the option of waiting until renewal and then telling them what the CPE requirement is for inactive at the time of renewal, so it's not a surprise. And then just having them wait. I think we've only done one mid.
Yeah. So Andrew, what would help you here from the LRC? Simply kind of an open double thumbs up. We don't need to do downgrades mid-cycle, and that we're on the right track. We're simply saying just do this at renewal time, and we don't need to make any rule changes. Or what would help you the most, Andrew, from the team's perspective?
I don't believe we need a rule to downgrade or to
Yeah.
go from active to inactive mid-season.
Okay, so you're asking kind of like for a thumbs up on the status quo, that we just allow people to simply switch from active to inactive at renewal time, and we don't need to do anything else, and that's continues to stay in the comfort zone of the LRC.
That seems like, that seems like the right process as opposed to going from inactive to active without any steps, right? But basically, probably life experiences and they think they're stepping back. It doesn't seem like that's a problem for public protection. My opinion.
Yeah.
Any other comments on that? I've got one comment back on on number 1 with language, but any other comments? And can people hear me? I gave Martin my mic and I grabbed a new one, so I want to make sure I'm okay.
Yeah,
So
as far as the CPA changing license stream, I can't think of any exposure difference or any enforcement difference. So I can't think of any additional liability to the CPA themselves by maintaining an active license for, part of a time when they are really operating as inactive. So I guess the only advantage to them might be asking for a refund of part of their fees, which, we wouldn't do anyway, right? So, yeah, I don't see any downside to that at all.
Correct, Amanda. We have zero authority to refund fees. So we don't, it's like once you renew, right? Even if somebody says, I renewed, I went through the process, regardless of whether it's at the inactive level or the active level, right? Once you've completed that renewal and you have whatever license it is you have from us at whatever level issued, there's no going back. There's no undoing it. You just have it. I think the only exception to that is the section of our rules where people literally walk through an administrative process of resigning their license, which is a whole other concept. That's no longer about switching status, but that's literally saying, I'm giving up my license, which is essentially a pathway that is only administrative if there is no discipline or investigation pending. That is possible for folks, and it's extremely rare. I mean, I can count, I think, still on. I still don't think I need to use more than one hand to count the number of incidents that I've been through as an executive director for almost 8 years now, where folks have gone through a resignation of licensure proceeding, and that's for the administrative version. There were a few that, quite frankly, get very complicated, where you have either a disciplinary record, a discipline issue, or an investigation pending, where that really becomes part of the disciplinary process, and then it's not a it's no longer a straightforward matter. It's no longer an administrative matter. Then it has to go through essentially creating a legal document that documents that person's exit out while an investigation is pending. And that's also extremely rare. I think I can think of maybe 1 or 2 incidents in my entire time where that's happened. So, and we don't need to make any changes for that in here. We are set up to do that.
So my question, and I'm not sure, now I'm getting echo, we'll see. So in 801, 010, 0121, we talked about whether or not we need that term active. We use that same language downstream when we're talking about retired and changing. And the reason we don't need it, because if I'm a CPA, I am by definition active. If I'm not using another adjective to qualify CPA, like inactive or retired. Is that why we would get rid of that term active, or do we need that adjective?
So I don't know about, we need to think about retired. Let's separate those out because they could be different analysis, right? So, but I think for what was happening here is that I think a lot of times people do lapse, right? They don't renew, and then they come back and they say, oh, I don't want to be lapsed, but I don't want to do all the CPE to become active. They just want to do some of it. And so they want to come back from lapsed to inactive status. And so I think if you basically, and so they're just changing it, that terminology there, that you can be lapsed and come back that way, right? They can be lapsed and come back to act. I would say like, so that's nice, right? Like that's a nice thing we would do for people, because I would say probably most other places they would make you come back to active status first and then go inactive is probably how most other boards that I have would do. But if that's the intent of, and that's the way I think that we've always done it. So I don't think we'd want to take that away from people.
Okay, so we would, so number 1 would say an Oregon CPA or PA.
Yeah, so I already
That is
changed
not
that.
expired, suspended. Okay.
Yep.
I was just concerned about I got my way through it, but I was looking at the word active.
Yeah, I took the word active out. So now it says an Oregon CPA or PA that is not licensed, expired, suspended, or revoked can apply for an inactive license.
Well, that is not, and you got rid of lapse too, right?
Yep.
So it's an or an Oregon CPA or PA that is not expired, suspended, or revoked.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Item next.
Well, okay, so the other thing,
Back to you, Angie.
yeah, so what I was trying to do was trying to like kind of make these all similar, like, and so like looking for the different process of like what you have for each types of like, so retired and this one, but so they have the application process, the renewal requirements, and sort of like kind of making sure that all of that was there, because that was the way it was in the rule. I believe now. So like just sort of stating like, these are the things that matter for this status, right? So you have how you apply, right? Like what you need in order to be able to do it. Then you have the actual application itself. And so one of the things I put in there, because we need to do this more for retired, because of the retired, because we need to know who their supervisor is. I sort of put sort of a similar thing here for inactive of like, when you're applying, that if they're working at a CPA firm, PA firm, or for a sole practitioner, they have to provide the name of the CPA firm or the sole practitioner where the applicant works and certify to the board. So it would just be like, you know, basically kind of like a checkbox thing of like that they're basically not doing any of these things, right? So it would just be part of that. Questions, concerns about that?
Hearing none.
Andrew, question.
Oh, got an Andrew question.
So someone coming straight off of education experience, and exams, can they go straight to inactive then? With this pathway?
Would they normally be able to?
It's never been brought up.
Yeah, I know. Like, I don't know. Would be the-
May I?
I guess in theory you could.
Why would they?
Yeah, and I'm actually not sure that we want to open up the door to it. I think that would really open up a Pandora's box, because I'm trying to think through this both from a national perspective, a UAA perspective, and the fact that, quite frankly, we're already in a little bit of Oregon unique territory when it comes to inactives, because we allow inactives to do a lot more than other jurisdictions. We have a CPE requirement for inactives, which also sets us apart from other jurisdictions. And I don't mean that critically, but it does mean that, and I'm especially looking at Ray right now, because Ray, you're so uniquely kind of steeped in the history of kind of how the profession has evolved over time. So at a very fundamental conceptual level, what I would love to help you validate, Ray, is that I think the whole concept, if you set aside the differences for a minute between the jurisdictions on whether they have inactive status and those that have inactive status, that I think what we have in common is that inactive status presumes that you were active at some point and then you needed to go inactive, as opposed to your goal in your professional life is to achieve inactive status as a CPA. And so does that make sense, Ray? Can you just
Yeah, that absolutely does. And Andrew, I mean, I've never, I don't think we've ever had the circumstance or ever had the discussion that's raised the circumstance of somebody applying for an initial license as an inactive CPA. I think it's the pathway to inactive has always gone through active status.
So
That you've been an active licensee and you reached a point in your career where things changed and you moved from active to inactive status.
Yeah, and the rule says that you need to be active first to be able to go to inactive.
Well, it doesn't anymore. We took that out. So in theory, you don't have the ability because I haven't sent it to anybody. I'm just doing it on my document. So now it says an Oregon CPA, but that just presumes, right? You would have to have had the license first. But in theory, you could, but you would tell them that, like, I mean, I don't know. Because, okay, so let's just look at the scenario. So I apply for my CPA license and I get my license, right? Like you apply for initial licensure. Initial licensure is only one way. So then you're like, you get your initial license and you're like, I want to be inactive. You're going to tell them they have to wait the year anyways, right? Because you're going to say you have to wait and then, so basically like they would have to, or 2 years. Is it a 2-year license or however long it is? 2 years. Then they just, because then maybe they don't want to have to do all that CPE or whatever. Would they just like, it's fine, they don't have to do it all because they're going to renew as an active? Okay. So, yeah, I don't think that there's a way. I was like trying to think through, like, I don't think there's a way for them to do it any other way. Like you have to apply for initial license. There's only one pathway to the initial license.
Right.
And then, but regardless.
And I think when you look at the UAA, the intent in the UAA is you're applying for an active CPA license. I mean, that's what the pathways are for. And I think if you went back and looked at the history, I'd be very surprised if you didn't have licensees that were active for 4, 6, 8 years at least before they went inactive. Or more. I'm just guessing what our history is, but that'd be my guess.
The way I read that language, I couldn't apply to be inactive from the get-go because I have to be an Oregon CPA.
Yeah.
To get there.
Right.
So I couldn't apply under the rule to be inactive from the get-go. I'm not an Oregon CPA yet. I've got to be a CPA to request inactive.
Yep.
Okay, great questions. Okay,
Um,
Angie, you keep us going for about another 10 and then we'll take a break, or at a nice convenient place where Angie says it's a nice convenient place.
Yeah, once we finish, why don't we just finish it inactive and then we can
Okay.
Yeah.
take a break. And then the reinstatement to active status. So an inactive licensee can reinstate to inactive. Or active, no, you wouldn't reinstate. Just an inactive licensee can reinstate to active status. Don't know why I would put both. Can reinstate to active status in accordance with,
Where are you now?
oh, 6.
6.
Okay, because we have the same issue with, since I thought we were talking inactive, and I have something in item 4, not 6, that says application for inactive status.
Mhm.
And there, I think we have the exact same problem that we fixed earlier. On the retired side, if you look at 4B, right, I think we have to take out at minimum, an applicant for inactive status must hold at the time of application a CPA license that is not lapsed, expired, revoked, or suspended. I think we have to take the lapsed piece out of there for the exact same reasons that we discussed earlier in the retired section.
Okay. Must hold an Oregon.
So take out the word active and the word lapsed in
Lapsed.
4B.
Okay.
Sorry, you were already on 6. You were already on 6, and I wanted to just slow that down before we get to the reinstatement piece. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm just reading now. I'm reading the rest of them too, just to make sure I didn't have anything in there that's like, okay. Licensee who's granted inactive status must renew in accordance with law, and if the inactive licensee works for a firm, the inactive licensee must blah blah blah. Okay, and then so an inactive, and then down to 6 of reinstatement, an inactive licensee can reinstate to active status in accordance with that. Inactive licensee use of CPA or PA designation. A licensee who is granted inactive status shall not use the CPA or PA designation unless the word inactive is used in conjunction with the designation such as CPA inactive, and the term inactive is listed in the same font size as CPA or PA. And that is how we've had it. Like, I just wanted them all to be the same because we kind of had it written differently for like different things. So I tried to make them all the same on that CPA designation issue. And then a CPA, for the CPA, inactive licensees must comply with CPA requirements as provided or and referring back to that. And then reporting requirements, in addition to so there's lots of other reporting requirements that have to happen, right? If you get a criminal conviction or that kind of stuff. But so in addition to any other reporting requirements required for licensees, inactive licensees must notify the board within, and I just put 30 days of initiating employment with the CPA firm or sole practitioner. I don't know if you guys actually care about that. This was just like one of the things I was thinking it would be like useful to know if an inactive licensee, because they have to tell us anyway. Like, well, so if you're an active licensee, and I think that's what I was thinking about, was like, if you're an active licensee and you change jobs, right, you have to notify the board. And I think for inactives, I don't know if we were, They do it too if they change jobs, like, so, but what if they're inactive and not even as a choice? So I don't know, is this okay with you guys? Do you want it? Do you not want it? Is it?
I've got a question on 6.
I changed that, just so you know.
Okay.
Having a hard time hearing Jason now.
As Jason forgot to turn his mic on.
That explains that. Thank
Oh,
you.
Thank you. So question on 6, and you may have, this is maybe what you changed, Angie. It says an inactive licensee can reinstate to inactive.
That's what I took out.
Okay,
I changed that.
okay.
So now it says an inactive licensee can reinstate to active status in accordance with.
Perfect, I'm done.
Yep. Any other questions, concerns, discussions? Nobody?
Not on that section, but I will admit that I do have some stuff that if I can get my computer to cooperate, because it's just actually started no longer showing me text. What I wanted to do is discuss some stuff on the statuses on page 53, but now my computer's malfunctioning, so I have to get,
The status is on, like, you mean for retired?
yeah,
We were going to take a break before we go to
okay,
retired.
cool. Then that gives me time to fix my computer.
Okay, so to allow Martin the time to deal with technology, we'll take a 10-minute break back at 4 minutes after 10 Pacific Standard Time because daylight savings was Sunday. All right, we do have quorum. We're missing Ray, but we're going to start so that we're close to when I said would be back. Oh, see, right on cue, right on cue. There's Ray. And with that, let's move back to Angie to begin talking about retirees. We swapped out batteries. So we swapped out batteries in 3 of the mics here, which means they'll be fine and everybody else's will go out. It's been that kind of morning.
Yeah.
You haven't watched a member of the crew here trying to get a simple cup of coffee. We won't explain who that was, but they now have one.
Okay.
So they ought to be good.
Yeah.
Angie.
So on the retired licensee status, so I have this just like the other one was, that says an Oregon active CPA or PA licensee that is not lapsed. So do you guys want me to take out the active and the lapsed for this one as well? Because people like to come back from retired status into, I'm sorry, people like to come from lapsed to expired. Retired, lapsed to retired. Is that what you were thinking, Martin?
Correct. Yes, it does happen, unfortunately, once in a while that actually a little bit more frequently in that status on a percentage basis, just because more of our retired level licensees sometimes struggle with our renewal process or doing it timely, even though, and that's, I think it's gotten a little better only because we've effectively process-wise, the licensing team was exceptionally kind and opened back up essentially a paper-based renewal process option, which I think for some of our retired level licensees was pretty critical in trying to get through our renewal processes. But it does happen that just stuff falls off the wagon. And so, yes, we do absolutely have situations still at the licensing level where, folks get lapsed and then a month or 2 later, it's like, what happened to my retired license? And they need to come back. And we just want to make sure we don't have a barrier to that.
So what this says then now is that it says an Oregon CPA or PA licensee that is not expired, revoked, or suspended can apply for retired status when that licensee has held an active CPA or PA license in good standing for a combined period of not less than 20 years.
Any comments?
Not on subsection 1.
Okay, so subsection 1. So Angie just, oh, okay, never mind. Got it. I couldn't see the slash through the 6. So it's not 16, it's 1. Other parts of the retired section.
A retired licensee cannot practice public accountancy or hold an ownership interest in a registered CPA or PA firm. A retired licensee can volunteer or provide pro bono tax services so long as there is no compensation or remuneration of any kind offered or paid. That was exactly how it was in the rule before. Or be employed by a public accounting firm. So this is a can be employed by a public accounting firm performing any work that someone without a CPA or PA license is entitled to perform in a public accounting firm. The work of a retired licensee must be supervised by an active licensee.
All right, so I don't want to be the skunk at the garden party, and maybe we discussed this before, but can someone just help level set with me the language in subsection 2B? And I'm just, I'm trying to understand, and I'm a little bit self-conscious because we are, what is the 4th? We're now on November 4. We are about 13 days away from a town hall where we're going to have to give some kind of an update here. And I'm kind of playing a little bit like I'm fast forwarding to that event. And I guess the way I want to just approach this is a member of the of our wonderful licensee base raises their hands in the room and says, "Why aren't you permitting a retired level CPA to have a, let's say at the minority level, an ownership interest in a CPA or PA firm?" And I just want to make sure I understand what the policy rationale here is, because if they didn't have a retired license, if they could just be, John Q. consumer, they could have an ownership interest in a CPA or PA firm. So unless I'm missing something, it's almost like we're punishing someone for being in retired status by saying that they can't have ownership in a CPA or PA firm. I understand the policy argument of if they were, that they couldn't be part of the counting toward a 51% ownership requirement because they're not active level CPAs, right? But I have to be honest, I struggle a little bit with that piece. And at minimum, because I'm not trying to drive policy here, at minimum, what I would love to walk away is being able to explain why what we have here makes sense and is essentially where we want to be, or say, do we need to rethink this? Because I'm not sure. I have trouble wrapping my head around 2B. And I would love to have thoughts, feedback of, including Martin, go away. This is settled stuff. We don't want to muck with this.
Yeah, I don't know if that was already, I'm looking to see if that was already in the rule.
So just from a consistency with other states' perspectives, you can't have anything other than an active CPA and be an owner for the other jurisdiction. So it's consistent. I don't know if that's the reason why we want to do it, but usually the requirements around that are that you're an active participant in the firm, and the implication with a retired status is that you couldn't possibly be. Now, of course, we've stepped out of that and said, you can work here, but we're also saying they have to be supervised by an active CPA. And there's a friction there of like, so they could have ownership of a firm that issues reports, but they have to be supervised by another CPA who's there's just a lot happening there.
It's existing rule. They already can't be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's old. And when I say that, like, it hasn't evolved with where we are today, where, I mean, in some ways, we're holding the previously, let's say the previous active licensees at a higher standard than those that were never certified. I mean, that's what kind of bugs me about it. I understand the friction piece. On the other hand, I remember visiting a firm where, a someone whose name was on the door, but they were a retired CPA. They just would come into the office to pay their bills. And that was kind of one of those discussions where we had that said, oh, they shouldn't even be in the office. But I mean, there was no computer, there was no nothing. And I think about some of these things with just the difference in structure and that sort of thing. I mean, we may not be like, how do I say this? Maybe a lot of other jurisdictions are not doing that, but I don't think that's a reason for us to prohibit that.
Okay.
I-
So Beth, with your much better, deeper national comparative perspective, I completely get why, you know, a retired person can't be over in that 51% plus ownership piece. But I think what I heard you saying, if you can just validate that from your perspective, it's consistent with other jurisdictions that a retired level person also cannot be part of the minority ownership structure.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
states are pretty specific about anyone who's ever been a CPA, that if they take in ownership, if they become part of the ownership, the 51%, that their license must be in active status.
Yes, but I'm focusing on the minority piece. I'm not focusing on part
Yeah,
of.
they consider them part of the CPA population
Okay.
and require it to be active. You cannot stay away from
Either
being
you
in.
don't have a license and you're a minority owner,
Mhm.
or you do have a license, in which case it needs to be active level and be part of the 51%. Is that a fair summary from what?
That is very fair. And I will tell you, as a firm administrator on the licensing side, this would be a freaking nightmare
Okay.
to have retired CPAs be part of the ownership group, because
why
they're
I
not,
wanted-
yeah.
Well, and actually the statute actually says all owners of the business organization who are not licensees must be active individual participants. So I don't know how you could be an
Mm.
active individual, like how, well, that's yeah, so they'd have to be an active individual participant. I don't know. It gets,
Okay, well, I'm happy to stop there. If folks don't think that there is a problem here and we're nationally aligning, then
do we need,
I wanted to at least ask the question in case I get the question.
do we need to,
Quite frankly, on the 17th.
we need to add that to inactives?
So hold that thought. Ray and then Mr. Robinson.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I guess I was sharing some of Martin's concern. I don't know. Then are we saying that a retired CPA cannot be part of an ESOP? Because we're allowing employee stock ownership, but this is an employee who is doing work supervised by somebody else. Can that person be part of an ESOP? I think I'm coming to where Sherry is, that this is old language. And as things evolve, Martin, when you get to the town hall, I think my response would be, well, we're open to listening to comments from the public, and this may be something that we'll revisit or take up, because this is an evolving area.
Yeah, I'll hold my questions. I want to make sure we get to Jason, but Angie, I'm going to have to put you on the spot on the ESOP piece, which changes on January 1. That's an interesting thought, Ray.
So, go ahead, Angie.
Oh, no, I was like, the ESOP thing I think is different, right? Like the ESOP becomes the owner, not like that's the way we did it, was like,
Yeah, let's hold that so we can get to Jason, because I want to circle back to that piece, because it might be a little bit of a backdoor thing via that ESOP.
So to put it in your terms, Martin, I think we punish anybody who goes from active to any other status CPA. That's just kind of the form that we have here. So if you're not an active CPA, then we'll punish you for not being an active CPA. But I want to reiterate what Ray said. I think it is old language. I think we should look at it and reconsider. But again, with Beth saying, if this makes it a nightmare for staff to be able to administer on the accountancy Board of Accountancy staff, I would say, potentially leaving it as is.
Beth, are you willing to talk for a second from your perspective, since you said, hey, you don't want to open that Pandora's box? You want to put a little bit more meat on the bone, if you will, in terms of
Yeah.
what do you see from a strictly practical level if we were
Yeah.
up that Pandora's box? What a difficulty we will be running into from your experienced perch?
Non-conformity with other states. And this is really only going to impact firms who have offices in more than one state and then also in Oregon, so they'd need an Oregon license or are providing assurance services in Oregon. To have that inconsistency, you will have people in a large partnership. We have almost 390 owners that will say, well, I can do this in Oregon. And it's like, that's cool, but you can't do that in any other state. So it just becomes an issue of nonconformity, and Oregon then again sticks out as the unusual one, which was sort of the premise of a lot of this work, was to try to conform. I know this stuff is all open for conversation right now. Things are rapidly changing. My recommendation would be probably try to stay conforming on that until we can see if other states are going to do that, just to allow for things to catch up.
I think Amanda has her hand up.
Does Amanda, do you have your hand up?
I do.
Cut off.
Thank
There
you.
we go.
It's hard for us to see a little bit on this screen for whatever sets of reasons. So I apologize for those of you that are trying to play the electronic and be super nice. So sorry, Amanda.
Yeah,
No worries, no worries.
Yep, go ahead.
So, I mean, that makes sense. I think, from the large firm, perspective, I think that definitely makes sense. And then thinking about it from a small firm perspective, if you have a retired CPA as an owner, let's say, even if unless they are completely removed and not involved whatsoever with the operation of the firm, the rest of the staff is going to look to that person for advice, for guidance, for all of these different things, right? And so because of that, I mean, it's hard, and because even the minority owners have to be active in the management of the business, I think it would be really hard to say, okay, as a retired CPA, you can look at non-compliance related firm management aspects, but not, so that you're not anywhere near, the advising active people, right? I think that would just be very challenging. I think it really impractical to say, even though I like the idea of saying, why couldn't you have ownership? Like, from a practical standpoint, I think it would be really, I think we're just asking for problems, really, when we think about it. The more I think about what that would look like in practice, I think it would be really challenging. Did that make sense?
Yeah, and the more I listen to this conversation, I'm open to listening to what will be said in the town halls, but I think we need to place a premium on trying to be in conformity with other states. That's something that, as much as we can, if we're going to go a different route, we have to have a very, very, very strong reason for doing that. And I'm not sure that there's that compelling a reason. That said, I'm certainly open to hearing the comments that people would have and potentially revisiting this down the road. But I think if somebody really asks, what's the reason for our current position, I'd be inclined to say, we understand, one, this is an evolving area, but two, conformity with other states is something that we place a premium on. So I think that would be where I would fall on this.
Does that mean, I'll say this slightly facetiously to the other Jason, it sounds to me like we should be more, the messaging will be more around we're listening, but we want to be consistent with other states rather than we enjoy punishing people in certain licensing statuses. Um, 'cause I probably won't use that. But I see where you're going with that, Chase, because you're actually right? That there's all this burden that comes into play once you're a licensee in terms of things that you can't do that people without a license can. Right.
Well, the way Amanda put it was very telling. It's like, okay, yeah, if
Yeah.
you become a retired CPA in your small firm, you're still going to be very influential.
Yes,
If
that
you,
that
yeah.
was that's I agree. I agree. That's Amanda, that was a beautiful explanation. So super helpful. Does that mean, Angie, going back to your comments, that everyone here is not just on board with keeping the language here in 2B, but that we need to put a similar explicit restriction in the inactive section in case that's not there? That are we all on board with that?
It's not there.
The
Oh, it's there.
it is there. Okay.
Never mind. Sorry, it is there.
Okay, so we have the same thing with inactives, and it sounds like that all makes sense to everybody.
Good discussion. Anything else on that? Okay, back to Angie, if she can remember where she was when I said, hold on, let's have the discussion.
So we did what they can do, and then moving to unless anybody wants to talk about what they can do, that it was the same, nothing's changed there. Application for retired status, an application for retired status must be made on a form provided by the board, and then an applicant for retired status. And then what it says right now, we got it, if you guys want to change this, must hold at the time of application an active Oregon CPA or PA license that is not lapsed. So it would be must hold at the time of application an Oregon CPA license. And I think, so on the inactive side, we do not have the specification that it's an Oregon.
Correct. That was changed, but it should also include inactive since they just need a combined 20. So if they had 20 earlier on and then inactive, they would still qualify.
So I was under the impression that in order to go retired, you needed 20 years of active. And that's what the rule already said. You needed 20 years of active.
Combined.
Combined, yeah.
Combined, right? You can go inactive and, yeah, right.
So inactive, just to be clear, inactive status in and of itself is not a barrier. So you
No.
could have somebody who's currently in inactive status say, I want to apply for retired status. If on their record they
Right,
have
20 years, right.
20 years in whatever state of, because we took out the Oregon specificity, right? Because people do move around, right? If they have 20 years worth of active status as part of their licensing history, then they would still qualify, even if at the moment in time that they apply for retired status, they are already in an inactive level.
Yep.
I
So what-
apologize. I misread that
Yeah.
quickly.
So
Yeah.
it says an applicant for retired status must hold at the time of application an Oregon CPA or PA license that is not expired, revoked, or suspended. So I think we're good there, but I'm wondering then, do we need to add the word Oregon on inactive as well? Because I guess, again, that probably is, people are not going to come in reciprocity looking for inactive.
But do we want to make it that way just for consistency? I'm getting a no from Martin.
So no, hang on a second. I thought that you just asked a question on reciprocity specifically, whether we need to have some kind of a reciprocity status for inactive level licensure.
Well, the way that inactive is written right now, it doesn't say Oregon. It just says you need to have a license, right? Does it say Oregon? Maybe.
Let's see. I thought it said
Well,
Oregon.
while you're looking, I just want to say for the record, I'm not trying to push policy, but just to be really clear, and hopefully also Ray can back me up on this. But reciprocity is always linked, and I don't know of any instances in the history involving any jurisdiction or NASBA, but the entire construct of reciprocity has always been linked to active level licensure only. There is no reciprocity piece when it comes to inactive or retired or any of those things. It's always been that the world of reciprocity is exclusively about active level licensure.
Yeah, and I also think that our intent here was if you're going to inactive status, you have an Oregon active license when you go to inactive status. You're not coming from Idaho active status to Oregon inactive status.
Correct. Andrew, I want to make sure I read your body language. Are you good? Does that cause problems with your team? Because that's one of the key things we need you for, and this is that you help keep us grounded here with the realities of what's going on day to day in the office.
So if you have an inactive Texas license, does that still mean that you can't practice public accountancy like a normal person would
Yeah, I mean,
in a CPA firm in Oregon?
yeah, because it quite frankly, inactive status in most jurisdictions literally means you're not allowed to do anything. You're just inactive, right? It's only Oregon that has a broader approach to what inactive means. And so the meaning of what an inactive license is not consistent across state borders. We have a far more liberal approach to what we allow inactives to do, including the reason, which is also the reason why we have a whole CPE construct. And that just doesn't exist in other jurisdictions. Which then again, to answer your question differently, Jason, it means that I think there is a legitimate policy basis on which the board, the LRC can say, it does make sense for us to distinguish between Oregon inactive license holders versus inactive license holders in other states, because the meaning is very different across state lines.
Okay. So,
But if we're still holding them to the same criteria, whatever licensure we don't need to grant them reciprocity, but if they're a retired licensee from Texas, we would hold them to the same retired licensee standards here in Oregon, with or without reciprocity.
no, they wouldn't have a license here.
So they could practice public accountancy or work in a CPA firm just like a normal person could, even though they had a CPA license at one time and became retired in that state and moved to Oregon during their retired years and decided to sorry.
Well, I think the issue is in Oregon, if they were here and they were retired, we would not have trouble with them doing something that a non-licensee could do. I don't know how their home state's gonna think about that as holding a retired license from their state, but that's a different subject.
Let me go to Amanda.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the language under reciprocity, and it says individuals who hold a valid CPA license in another state and wish to obtain an Oregon license must complete the application, pay the fees, and demonstrate that they meet the requirements of substantial equivalency.
Mm-hmm. And substantial equivalency is exclusively about active status. There's no mobility privileges for inactive. There's no mobility privileges for retired. But Jason, I have to congratulate you because I definitely feel like you're making me earn breakfast this morning and kind of thinking through that, because I'm actually wondering, okay, we have clarity that there is no such thing as reciprocity or mobility privileges if you're in inactive status or retired status in another state. But I'm going to put Angie on the spot for a minute. What's from just council's perspective, not policy perspective, strictly legally speaking, if you have exactly the scenario that Jason brought up, right? A retired level, we picked on Texas, so let's keep picking on Texas. A retired level Texas person, right, shows up in Oregon. On the current construct, is that person treated differently than somebody who does not have a license at all?
It could be. I mean, that's the way the board has generally handled it in the past. Would have said they're practicing without a license. Potentially. I mean,
Because they're not active.
well, it also depends on what they're doing, right? Like, so
Yeah.
before, like, or if they came in and they were, you know, obviously if they were doing a test, no go, right?
Mhm.
You gotta have an active license for that period. I think, you know, this will be a little different. I don't know that many states even have retired status.
Yeah.
I don't think there's that many of them.
And they go about it very differently. There's
Yeah.
no consistency with retired status across state lines either.
But I think it would depend on what they were doing, first of all. And second of all, I think it could potentially be considered practicing without a license if
Mhm.
it's something that we would normally require a license for here, or something that we would require somebody that had a license get reinstated to do.
Well, Texas, the one we're picking on, does allow you to be a retired CPA if you meet the age requirement and years of experience.
But I'm
So we picked on
also,
the right state.
but I guess I'm also thinking that if I'm retired, have a retired license from Texas, I moved to Oregon, and I'm hired in a CPA firm, and I'm doing what a retired Oregon licensee could do, would we have a problem with that? And I'm guessing we probably wouldn't. The minute they cross the line to where we'd say in Oregon, you have to have an active license, you can't do that with your retired Texas license.
Yeah, and I just want
You're-
to point. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, but in Ray's example, if they're living in Oregon and working for an Oregon firm, they need to have an Oregon, I mean, they have to be licensed in Oregon. They would need at least a reciprocal license anyway.
And along those lines, I just scrolled back up to our definition section, and in the definitions, retired status is specifically referred to as an Oregon board issued license. It's not meant to encompass retired licenses in other states.
So if the person came in from Texas with a retired license, they don't have reciprocity.
There is no such thing as reciprocity status on anything other than an active
License.
That's
So they
still,
would, but they would also be in violation of working at a CPA firm because they once held a CPA license. Wow, talk about doubling down.
I mean, it's always been, not new.
Well, it may not be new. It doesn't mean I like it.
I mean, that's the sort of thing we always struggle with, right? Is like anytime you have someone, once you get the license, then you kind of either have to keep it.
How do we have jurisdiction over them? Because they're in a CPA firm?
Well, or because they are practicing without a license. I mean, it would, like I said, it would really depend on what they were doing.
So
You would have to get a complaint, right? Like, so you'd get a complaint
yeah.
practicing without a license, and then we'd have to evaluate it from there. We've never had one that I'm aware of.
The issue would be not that they were treated just strictly unlicensed, but if they're working somewhere doing work that other unlicensed people could do, but they're holding out as a retired CPA because they hold a retired license from another state. That's the scenario we're talking about.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure about that either, but I think you're right that if there is, for example, a holding out issue, if they're here as a Texas person and they say, I'm a, whatever,
They can't do that for sure.
I don't think that they can do that because we don't recognize. That's a really interesting one. At the retired level, what happens if they hold out and say, which is accurate, right? If they have a Texas level retired license, right? And they say, I'm a Texas retired CPA, which is technically a true statement,
Yeah,
right?
but if they put Texas next to it, I don't think we would have a problem.
Oh, if they say that I'm a retired CPA, but they're really retired licensed CPA, but they don't say Texas, then there is a problem, yes.
Wait, why? They're still saying they're a retired CPA. As long as they said they were a retired CPA, why would we have a problem with it either way?
CPA, retired license CPA, because for us, retired license here is specifically an Oregon version under our rules.
I think the major issue though would be practicing without an Oregon license if they were doing things where you needed an Oregon license to do.
I think it's bigger
Yes,
than
so-
that because, right, strictly if it's I mean, if they're not treated as unlicensed, there's lots of things you can do in a CPA firm as an unlicensed person, so long as you're under the supervision of a CPA. However, if you have held a license in the past, you're prohibited from doing a lot of those things that an unlicensed person could do. So are they treated as unlicensed or not? I think is really comes down to the question, and which set of rules do they fall under?
Yeah, and that's what I was asking. And it sounds like in the past, we have always treated them as a licensed CPA, even though they have no reciprocity to be a retired CPA.
Well, they would technically have reciprocity if they got reinstated in Texas as a regular CPA, then they can reciprocity over in that route, which is how, every probably jurisdiction would do it. They're not going to take a retired person retired because it's sort of a.
So in other words, to get retirement status in Oregon, I would need to reactivate my Texas license, get reciprocity for a CPA license, and then retire here in Oregon. But can I retire in Oregon? Don't I need years of experience as an Oregon CPA?
No, you just need 20 years of experience as a CPA, period.
Okay.
Active
Well,
level.
thank goodness. So I could at least retire again once I did all of that. Wow. That's harsh.
Well, and Jason, the bottom line to this for most of those folks like me is retired. It means retired. Retire.
You are the most retired person I have ever seen, Ray. So I don't know.
Question on this. I'm not sure if it's an issue, but the retired status licensee needs to be supervised by a licensee, but in definitions, a supervisor licensee is directly referring to an applicant. Does that need to be changed?
Sorry, say that again. I got weird.
Definitions 74. Supervisor licensee is a licensee who provides direct supervision to an applicant. But under retired status.
Yeah, we would have a different, I can look at that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was it.
But it's a very fair point because
Yeah.
there's a difference between a supervisor licensee for supervision toward licensure status as opposed to what we actually have in the rules have had in the rules for a while already under retired, right? This is that they're if with allowing them back into a public accounting firm, that they have to be under the supervision of a licensee. And that I don't think ever intended as having to meet the exact same criteria as we have for those licensees that we formally call supervisor licensees toward licensure. So that whole framework of, you need to have been licensed for at least 5 out of the last 7 years before the beginning of supervision. That's all, I think, a initial licensure related construct.
Yeah.
It does not relate to what I think the board or the LRC wanted to accomplish, but I think what you're raising there, Andrew, is a good question of, do we need to tweak something in the rules to make that distinction more clear? That in one case, we're just literally talking about anybody with a CPA active license can supervise the activity of
So
you know,
I
a
just
retired
got my
status
license
CPA.
last year, and I somehow got Ray out of being retired to come work at my firm seasonally as retired. I could supervise him.
Yeah, I
With
mean, we
1
didn't put
year?
we didn't put any US, there was no
There was no
discussion about
guardrails, yeah.
trying to put
Yeah.
any ramifications around it.
Okay.
Like, I didn't use supervisor licensee, like it isn't defined. I put supervised by an active licensee as trying to like, but maybe it would be, do we need to use a different term?
I don't want to overcomplicate. I just direction.
Yeah.
So I think the reason we did that is way back when we were discussing this, I retire, Ray retires, we come into a firm, Ray's doing auditing, I'm doing tax because you don't want me to do auditing. We're treated just like anybody else. And, Ray and I are each under the direction of a senior who's been licensed for 2 years. Great. That's the exact same position that any other staff person would be in.
So he couldn't do auditing, just so you know, as a retiree.
As a retiree.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
you'd have to be licensed again.
Yeah.
But or you come and do tax with me, Ray. But that's why I think we wrote it that way. And so that definition, where it's talking about a supervising licensee, that term is defined, whereas down in 3B, under retiree status, is just has to be supervised by an active licensee, somebody with a license. And yeah, Andrew, you've got a license, you've had it for a year. Yep, you can supervise me. Why you would want to is a different issue, but
Thanks for the clarification.
hey, Angie, does that help?
Yeah, I'll double check just gonna highlight that in yellow just to make sure, Andrew, that it works the way I did it. Okay, so, an application for retired status was made on a form provided by the board and must be accompanied by a fee. An applicant for retired status must hold at the time of the application an Oregon CPA or PA license that is not expired, revoked, or suspended. An applicant for retired status must provide sufficient evidence to the board that the applicant has held an active CPA or PA license in good standing for a combination of 20 years. If an applicant for retired status works for a CPA firm, PA firm, or sole practitioner, the applicant must certify to the board that the retired status licensee does not perform any work that someone without a CPA or PA license is not entitled to perform in a public accounting firm, and provide the name, contact information, and license number of the active licensee supervising the retired status licensee. Now, I did not specify in here if you wanted that, if the person doing the supervision needs to be an Oregon licensee.
Thoughts? Do we care if Jason comes back and is supervised remotely by an Idaho licensee? And that Idaho licensee reviews all my work. I'm working like a staff person. Or do they need to be an Oregon licensee?
Would it matter for a non-licensed?
Wouldn't matter, for a non-licensed person, wouldn't make a difference.
Then again, why are we punishing the Oregon licensee that wants to be retired?
So then we would leave it, just has to be supervising, the supervising CPA, the active licensee who's supervising, which that, as I look at that and I look to those on the call at larger firms than mine, but at our firm, that active licensee, I come back in, I could be supervised by 2 or 3 or 4 different people in the same month.
So we did put that they had to name a person.
Yep. But
And
what
if-
if that changes
you
the
have to-
month after?
You had to notify the board.
Somebody leaves tomorrow.
Somebody leaves, so that seems, from an administrative standpoint, I'm gonna reduce it to the absolute absurd. So I'm working for Chris this week. I work for Betsy next week. I work for Mandy the following week. I work for Colleen the following week because they've just got me bouncing around and doing different projects. Does
Yeah, I
the
think-
board
I don't
really care?
No, I don't think that's what it would matter. You just have to have what, I think that what I remember the conversation being around wanting this was that the concern was having, allowing retireds back into firms,
Yep,
like at all. Was
Yep.
that like this idea of like people give it more clout. And so just wanting some person to sort of remind them like, hey, like a person that's there to like, is like sort of like overseeing what they're doing and they're not like meeting with clients or like doing things that they shouldn't be doing as like is what I remember the conversation being, and I could be wrong, but that's what everybody was
yes,
talking about.
that's where we went.
So I don't think it was that like, it's who you're working for, like you're super, like, it doesn't have to be the person necessarily supervising the project you're doing, right? It's just like somebody that's overseeing you while you're there, checking in with you, making sure that you're not doing things you shouldn't be doing.
So in other words, it would be the person responsible for that person.
Yes.
So in that case, then you would want them to be an Oregon license, so you could punish them for not being responsibly monitoring that person.
Yeah, I mean, that would be,
If they were Idaho or Texas licensed CPA, we would still not have any jurisdiction saying you did a bad job of not monitoring what this person was doing.
So who gets in trouble there? That the retiree should, because they've said, hey, I'll follow these rules. I'm thinking about me being the supervising licensee, and I'm not with them every day to know that whether or not they stepped across the line. And I may not know that they've stepped across for a week or two. And now I'm subject to discipline because I'm not checking in with them on a day-to-day basis. Is that the direction we want to go?
I mean, so that's the problem I always run into too with like, we have the requirement of like having to have an Oregon licensee be the manager listed, right? And they're the person held accountable. And like, we always struggle with that because it does feel like it's sort of the same idea, right? Of like, you're supposed to know absolutely everything that's going on in the firm and you get in trouble regardless. Cause I guess you're being the one willing to take that on, that risk. I guess, I don't know. I mean, it's required, that is a requirement in statute, but, that somebody has to be named for that, but like, so I don't know. I mean, this was, I don't know what the hope was, but I would have assumed that it was that you would have another person to hold accountable for this person's actions.
I think that sounds like the intent. Having somebody supervise the person is they're accountable and making sure they're doing the right thing.
Mhm.
So why wouldn't they be, even though you're not the one managing them on a day-to-day basis, you would still be the CPA responsible for them. And
It seems-
thus we would want you to be an Oregon licensed CPA.
Sorry to snipe, a little pause. I didn't mean to
Yeah,
talk.
go ahead.
It would seem that really the answer to the questions is who is the supervising? So not necessarily, are you the managing partner in the firm and
Mhm.
you don't know what, the day to day. But even if in the case, Jason, where you were mentioning they're working for this person, then this person, then this person, somebody knows that they're moving from person to person. It shouldn't be that nebulous. So to me, just thinking, I'm like trying to think of both sides, but to me, it's like if they're going to be in the firm, there's some supervisory management process that should be there. Because otherwise, if there isn't, that means they're working on their own. So they're really not working under a CPA. Only the fact that there's a CPA. So then they're in violation, right? So, and they're retired, so they would be subject to, the related to the board's rules. To me, it's not, I'm worried that we're trying to find more holes in it than really might be there, because we can find an exception for every single thing. But I
Yeah.
think it gets right back to, and I'm being respectful when I say that, but I think it gets right back to they're being hired as a retired, someone has to be supervising them.
Agreed.
So,
It-
and I think it does make sense that it's an Oregon person.
I think so too, because otherwise it's kind of like, who is responsible? Nobody, I mean, there might not be anybody responsible then.
And
Yeah.
putting a person, Frank supervisor, Ray and I go back into a firm, and I'm gonna pick on us both, Ray, for a minute. Really, is a brand new manager going to be able to supervise you? If you start, oh, I've known that client forever. It's okay. I'll just talk to him on the phone for a minute. Is a manager going to have enough? They should, but is a manager going to have enough muscle to say, you know, Ray, you can't get on that phone call? They should. And all I'm saying, I'm not saying what we've got built into this is incorrect or anything else. I like what we've done, but we're putting somebody into a place. Whereas if it's a partner, oh yeah, a partner will be able to, you know, get you and I to do what we're supposed to do. So the supervisor's got to be in a position to where they can they can handle one of us retirees that's just used to doing what we've done forever.
So what you're talking about, Jason, is going back to the whole reason we said, no, you can't have a retired person in there. I mean,
Yeah.
I like where we are.
I do too.
because, like, I don't like that at all, you know, respectfully,
Oh,
you know,
no, I agree with you.
because at the end of the day, again, the firm, somebody is over that. Okay, somebody owns that practice, whether, you know, if you have a manager that's the licensed CPA, right, with 1 year, they're not they're not going to be the sole owner of the firm, or they wouldn't be manager, they'd be managing partner. So I think there's still those checks and balances about who is supervising. And again, so if it's a manager, somebody should be over the manager. So, you know, is that in you know, true person firm, is that one of the two owners, I mean, partners? Is that one of the two owners or whoever? There's got to be a licensee there at the top if it's a really small firm. And if it's bigger, there's that tiered hierarchy.
So I agree with you. Thank you for going down this long road with me. Back to what Jason Robinson said, then since both the retired status person and whoever is identified as their supervisor are both subject to the governance of the board, then do we want item B to say, provide the name, contact information, license number of the Oregon active licensee, because that brings them under the governance of the board of Oregon's board. Long way to get back to where you started us, Jason.
But that, I mean, that,
Yeah, I think that's what everybody said. That there should be, we should have Oregon in there.
that for what you're saying, that sounds reasonable, because also, you know, it makes it, by supervising, you're not putting the managing partner of the firm. Let's just say there's 20 partners there, right? You're not putting the managing partner at risk. The supervising is one of the other 19 partners there.
Yep. Okay.
I've added Oregon to all of it.
And
all
thank you
parts.
for allowing me to think through that with the group verbally.
Okay. So, application, an application for retired status made on the form, an applicant for retired status must hold time of application, a CPA license that revoked, expired. I think we already went through this. But an applicant for retired status must provide sufficient evidence to the board. They've had an active CPA or PA license for a combination of 20 years. If an applicant for retired status works for a CPA firm, they must certify to the board retired status does not perform any work that someone without a CPA or PS is not entitled to perform, and provide the name, contact information, and license number of the Oregon active license supervising the retired status licensee. Renewal requirements. A licensee granted retired status must renew in accordance with law, and if working in a CPA firm, certify the renewal form, again, the same stuff, and provide the name, contact information of the Oregon active licensee. CPE retired licensees are not required to obtain or report CPE. Retired licensee use of CPA or PA designation. Basically the same thing where they say retired in conjunction with CPA retired and the term listed in the same font size. Reinstatement. The one thing, when we changed that above, Andrew, one thing I just realized is that, isn't it going to happen though that a retired person sometimes lapses or an inactive person sometimes lapses? I think that's why I had that. I think that's why it said a licensee in retired status will be permitted to reinstate to retired, meaning because if they lapsed, they might need to reinstate to retired.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And we took that out in the inactive one above.
So an inactive could lapse
Right.
as well. So
Right.
we should be able to give them the opportunity to come
Right.
back out of lapsed.
So I think I need to add that back in above. So will be permitted to reinstate to retired, active, or inactive status in accordance with the provisions of blah. And then again, the reporting requirements, just the changes of who they're working for and all that stuff is there. Any additional? Questions, comments, concerns?
Hearing none, that gets us through both the inactive and the retired status piece, which we had put off a little bit for time. Angie's added in the piece on peer review. What else? Jason Robinson, do you remember anything from the board meeting specifically that we have not addressed? Putting you on the spot a little bit, I know, but just
No,
other three.
I don't. I think we've over addressed everything.
Thanks, Jason.
Okay. So with that, Angie, do you think we've got a good set of rules?
Yeah, so I just need to look at the reciprocity ones, which
Yeah. So I think there's three things that I know of off the top of my head that we need to address on the 18th in this document. One came out of this meeting, which is we need to take offline some quality assurance that where we look at the reciprocity rules related to Senate Bill 797 and making sure that those are aligned. Second piece is the mea culpa piece, where some work is remaining on the help that Jeremiah has given us in making sure that that language makes it in there. So that's piece number 2. And then piece number 3 is the one that we've talked about at this committee, which is that part of the function of November 18 was to take any feedback that we get from the town hall on the 17th. So those are the 3 primary moving parts that I think we have that are kind of the remaining potential language updates, changes, and tweaks, but nothing huge, hopefully, anymore. Those are the 3 that I'm aware of, but others, please weigh in if I missed something.
A comment that is probably a bit early, it's more appropriate on the 18th. As I look back on the past 2 years, wow. The work that this group has done, wow, amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Sherry says we've been through 4 rule
Is
changes.
that right? 4 rule changes?
Wow.
I think so.
We need to have Beth come out and we have a party.
Yeah.
Cause I think everybody else is local, but see, would have to fly Beth out. So, okay, with that, should we talk about the town hall on the 17th and talking points and things that the committee would like to have us plan and tuck in?
Are there, do we need to also notice that as an LRC meeting as well? Is there gonna be,
LRC is scheduled for the next day.
no,
the
but I'm
18th.
like, how many of the LRC?
Do we,
members-
the question is, will we have a quorum of the LRC
Oh,
present
right.
so that we would have to notice it as an LRC meeting? We know we will not have a quorum of the board present, so we can avoid, I know Sherry, you recall from the last town hall that we had to like,
Only one from the board.
right? And so the question is, can we do a quick show of hands, both in the room and on Zoom? Who all is planning on attending the town hall? That is a voting member of the, okay, so we have 1, 2,
It's the
and
LRC meeting. You got 4.
3.
Nope, you've got Amanda, Ray, Sherry, and I.
And- Oh, there's 4. Okay, so we do have to notice it as an LRC. Okay,
Is that a big deal?
no,
I can just not come.
no, but it's super helpful to know because it means there's a whole bunch of requirements that kick in on the state end that I can worry about. But it means that there will be a little bit of formality too. We were going to have to call the LRC meeting to order and do that, but we can figure out a way to do that in a very minimalist, non-disruptive manner. We won't have any action items. We just have to call it to order as a public meeting. We have to publish it as a public meeting, list it in a public meetings calendar and so on. But that's not a problem at all. In fact, I'm thrilled that there are so many people in the audience because basically what it means is if our board chair and I get questions that we're stumped by, we're just going to turn to the LRC and members that are present and say, take it away, fix it for me, help me.
So Amanda and Ray, do you still want to come?
Would you prefer that we not have a quorum, Martin?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. It's just, I don't want to scramble at a
Yeah.
minute and get caught in what could be a technical violation of public meetings law.
Thank you for, I'm glad Martin and
Oh.
Angie are here because I don't know those rules. Ms. Amanda,
Martin? Yeah, quick question. So if you notice it as a public meeting and for some reason one of the 4 of us can't make it, what kind of problem does that cause for you?
Not a lot, because it's
Okay.
much better to pull back on a public meeting than to not notice it in the first place.
Okay.
So it would be good to get a heads up if you're like, hey, I thought I was going to be there. I'm no longer going to be there. Just making sure you know that we will not have quorum, because it will probably allow us to then say something much briefer on the public record, to the extent that people, it's just easier if I know ahead of time, but it's not a problem.
Can I add some clarification? So it's available both in person and web. So
Yeah.
when we say be there, we're talking about both of those. We're not
Yes.
talking about in person only.
Yes. So it doesn't matter whether a member of the LRC attends by web or in person. Either one gets us to quorum if we have 4 or more. Cool.
And just an update while we're at it, hot off the press, 21 in person, 54 on web.
wow,
Okay.
that's great.
So we'll be sending,
So 75,
we'll send out another reminder.
76, Andrew wants to come.
Yes, upstairs.
It'll be upstairs.
Yeah.
Jason, did you already ask the question of any feedback from the committee regarding messages that they would like us to send from the stage, and anything that this committee wants us to focus on? I think, did you already ask that question?
That's just at the beginning of
Okay.
this. So thank you for asking again. Great segue. What would you like us to say?
From the LRC perspective, is there anything in particular that you want to emphasize messaging wise that we can incorporate on the 17th? Whether it's listening points, whether it's this is what we're proud of, this is what we would like feedback on, any particular thoughts other than not saying that sometimes we seem to punish people for certain licensing statuses?
I mean, I guess my thoughts would be just to like maybe reiterate how we really have put a lot of effort into trying to take a conscientious approach and look at things from all angles to better the Oregon licensee experience and the profession in Oregon as much as possible, right? And to make those improvements while protecting the safeguards. But we really did. I mean, we really tried to look at this from every angle that we can to say, how do we move everybody forward in a way that's best for the long run? So yeah.
Other comments? Thank you, Amanda.
This is Beth Spencer. I'm assuming there will be a great deal of interest in the new pathways and implementation dates and accessibility. And so hopefully we can clarify that a little bit for folks too. You know, I think as we mentioned, we didn't put rulemaking activity in the statute, so we can't, or process, or there's something where we can't do anything until that January 1 when the statute becomes effective.
Yeah. And I will work with council a little bit more beforehand because I'm pretty sure that I'm going to get questions that are not going to be about policy, but about like what is possible when this whole issue of that we're going to have to take kind of our licensing activity down to basically almost zero during the month of January while the rules are exposed. Right, there's some real technical issues, and I anticipate some questions around, does this mean that I shouldn't apply until February? Right, what happens if I apply in, December and I want to come in under one of the new pathways? Is there going to be a bonfire in the office with my application, or will it be, held in a drawer until we can process it? I think there's going to be more like some of those very practical on the ground type questions that I want to get ready for with my team. And then there might be one or two of those that are less about process in the office and more about legalistic pieces. I'm probably going to run through a list with Angie around, hey, if we get a reciprocity application in the door, is that also on hold given that the reciprocity stuff is changing, right? That's going to be a hard one because that stuff that existed before January 1, it exists in very similar ways after January 1, but I'm still going to need to get clarification of, does it literally mean we also cannot process reciprocity applications for a month because of that issue? There's all kinds of like detailed questions that are not going to be about policy, but about basically legal issues that I'm going to have to work through with council and that I want to try to work through in the next 12 days so that I can be a little bit more prepared to answer those from the podium.
Martin, and the other thing too is that, as you're going through all of those are all like, yes, yes, yes. Because a lot of times, I think a lot of what you've just said, people haven't even thought about yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I think just that proactive review, and then people are going to take that back and share it with others, so kind of getting people to that point of they need to know what they don't even think they need to know or realize they need to know yet.
And real quickly on that point, because this is coming into play, for the month of January, people who are concerned about this upcoming filing season, whether, what to expect as far as their licenses. And, if they apply January 1st, like, is it going to be February 15th? Is it going to be, when can they expect that to be active, and how would that impact because the filing season is, right there on the heels. So.
That's a good point. There'll probably be people who can't sign under their firms or company's policies until they have an active CPA. So.
Yeah. I mean, for reciprocity stuff, I will simply say one of my messages will obviously be, if you're going to need to reciprocate in, which is probably not going to be all that relevant to this audience, do it in December before so that we can get you can get you set, right? Because we not only have this change, what probably is not fully on the radar, maybe even of this LRC, right? We're also going to have staff under pressure because right at the time as we're dealing with the literal changeover to Senate Bill 797 world is when the staff also needs to deal with firm renewals, right? So we're going to have a lot of incoming at the same time. And so any pressure that we can take off, whether it's on the applicants or us, will be helpful if we can spread out that workflow and get some people to come in earlier rather than in January when I think things will get a little dicey for about 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, and Martin, I mean, you said that, most of the people in the room probably wouldn't be impacted, but anybody who's a firm owner who's looking to hire somebody, those would be very helpful things for them to know. Hey, it's better if we can get somebody in the pipeline in December as opposed to waiting until the first week of January. It's going to really impact, when their license is active under the firm. So I think that could be very impactful for people.
So Martin, just chiming in too, and Amanda, thinking about you as well in this process for about what I'm about to say. When you are prepped up for that November 17th meeting, you're going to have some thinking already.
Mm.
So I don't know if there's any way, and I hate to even ask this, but if there's any way that we could get you to do like that.
Yeah.
Where that, I know OSCPA, we could share that out with our members, like a message from the board, maybe Amanda might be able to, and I'm not delegating anything to you, Amanda, but you might like that for some of your members, but also maybe it goes out to.
Well, as I recall, it is in the marketing materials that we approved for this event, is that it's meant to be interactive Q&A, right? Not just presentational.
But I'm thinking about like taking that Q&A and what you're talking about and us being able to move that out after the town hall, post town hall to members at large, because I mean, this is a great turnout, but it's not the whole universe, you know what I mean? So that we could get some of those things out, and that might actually reduce down some of the queries coming into the board, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Like, so there are things you guys could post, right? But things that we could send out as well, saying, hey, in case you missed this, be aware.
Yeah.
And, it would be from a message from the board, Oregon Board of Accountancy, Q&A, whatever. Just thinking. Probably a lot of work, but I worry that maybe it'll be less work than a bunch of phone calls and queries coming in.
Any other comments? Any other comments on the 17th? Okay, we have about 10 minutes that we can do a little bit of a NASBA update. NASBA issued, while Sherry and I were at AICPA Council, NASBA issued a white paper on the APS and PE, and that was also sent out with materials for the meeting. So Martin, do you want to talk through that along with the NASBA conference?
Yeah. Super high level, and also in the interest of time here. Essentially what happened here is I'll talk a tiny bit about the tenor of the conference and then what we really, I would love to have some help with from the LRC specifically. The APS-PE white paper that came out on, I think it's Friday a week ago, essentially represents a little bit of a changing course, not so much in terms of substance, but in terms of process. Because in essence, what really happened here is that the NASBA APS PE task force stepped back from saying we don't really want to issue a white paper that is very prescriptive at this stage or full of recommendations on what to do or not to do, but instead is kind of taking the first step of essentially asking a whole bunch of questions, really more, and asking for feedback. So it's much more of a first step in a development type document rather than a please read this for guidance document. And in that sense, the logical jump to the LRC is I think it's likely, without having specifically discussed it with our chair, that we're going to spend a lot more time on the APS PE piece, either on November 18th or subsequent LRC meetings. And we're going to need your help kind of crafting some initial feedback to this. The second piece I will say while I'm on LRC help is, and then I'll return to kind of discussing a little bit of what happened at the conference. It is my understanding that literally at this moment in time, exact moment in time, a meeting is in progress at the AICPA level, and the Peak Committee, I think, is currently meeting. And we hear that there should be imminent work coming out of the AICPA Peak Committee also related to APS PE and what recommendations they might make with respect to changes, particularly in the independence rules of AICPA. And I'm hearing it could become quite technical and in the weeds with potentially some substantive changes. If that's true, we should know pretty imminently. I think it's extremely likely, like above 80%, that will come out and be released prior to our November 18 LRC. If so, it would be good if we could at least touch base on the 18th around this, because my procedural understanding is that AICPA is intended on a shorter than normal exposure period, which means that to the extent, with LRC's help, the board is trying to work through figuring out how we should react to that exposure draft will be a little bit challenging, timing and logistics wise. So we may need some significant help from the LRC, either on the 18th or maybe at another meeting in December. I don't know that yet, of figuring out what are LRC's thoughts around that release and substantively. So those are two big help requests. And then the third piece I'll say is just in terms of general tenor of the conference, the easiest way that I will sum it up is that there is nothing that happened at this NASBA conference that provided any significant step forward or insight, or this is the clarion true north of what we should start thinking about or doing related to APS PE world. That's, I think, probably the most neutral summary that I will give. Beyond that, I'll simply say, this is my personal opinion. My fear is that we're still really far away from a real consensus, from any kind of a consensus in the profession on how to navigate that space. It's still very exploratory. I think it's still very cautious. And my fear is that it will not be an issue where coming to a consensus or clarity will be easy at all. In fact, I think we're just beginning to see, I think, the difficulty that we will have navigating this over the course of next year in terms of how where the profession is going to end. So we're going to need a lot of help, from this committee, particularly not just imminently, but probably over the next few months in terms of navigating what I think will be a difficult space, not just in Oregon, but around the country. That's kind of, I'll leave it at that as a high level summary.
Great comment.
I think as I look at this and as I looked at the white paper, it's going to take us more than the November 18th meeting to discuss the white paper.
Yeah.
The white paper has some very deep questions that are gonna require some serious discussion. And the comment deadline is January for the white paper, so if LRC is gonna discuss it, we need to fit some time in before I think it's the December board meeting, so as we look at the schedule, I think we need to put aside some serious time for this. There's a lot of meat in those questions.
There is. Other comments? That lays the table for, we still have work to do. We still have work to do. If there are no other comments, then I will adjourn this meeting, this public meeting of the Laws and Rules Committee. Time is now 11:26. We are 4 minutes early. And thank you for all of your work and support as we've gone through this. It's been amazing. Some more work to do, but amazing. With that, thank you, staff. Please stop the recording. Goodbye, all.